It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast, right around Australia, 7 days a week. We are talking what else but your property news, trends and market fluctuations. Many Aussie cities, as we know, are running at different speeds. And with over 1,300 property podcasts, you can keep pace of what is happening in your local neighbourhood. It is a Thursday morning, July the 17th. Here's some data news from financial comparison site Moza. They reveal that average home loan debts for Australian homeowners has nearly doubled over the past decade. The typical loan has surged from $389,000 and change to $659,000 and change, meaning that homeowners are now paying an extra $71 per day on their mortgages compared to 10 years ago. That is just one of the many, many reasons that you are feeling the increase in your wallet or your purse at the moment. And this morning, it's that time of the year again, because we are halfway through the year. It's time to look back 12 months ago to see what we were talking about, thinking about, and what the market was doing in Australia. Well, at least the way that we were reporting on it. So it's July 2024. And one of the talking points that hasn't changed was arrears for mortgage payments and how they kept on going up last year.
Arrears have risen over the past few quarters, really since the June quarter of 2022 when interest rates were starting to rise. But it's worth noting, even with an increase in the rate of arrears, it's still very small overall. It sits at about 1.6% of outstanding housing credit that's coming in more than 30 days late. So I think when we talk about the increased risk around mortgage serviceability when you've got weaker economic conditions and higher interest rates, it definitely flares up, but it flares up in certain pockets of the market. Some of those pockets we've seen are the more outer suburban peripheral areas of Sydney and Melbourne, where housing is expensive and you've probably got people on slightly lower incomes struggling with their rising mortgage costs.
And talking about the property market being expensive, Australian dwellings, let's talk about the values, which of course increased a further 0.7% in June, taking growth to 8% across the financial 2023 and 24 year. Now, this is the equivalent of around $59,000 you guys have reported on increase to the median dwelling value in Australia, which is now at $794,000. And beneath these reported numbers, of course, the market is running at different speeds. Now, that won't mean a lot to most people feeling very happy, of course, that the 23-24 financial year is seeing growth on their properties, but it is a factor, isn't it, this two-speed market?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things to understand about housing values rising month after month after month is that increasingly it's being driven by a select few markets. And what we're finding is that about 70% of the growth in home values in the combined capital cities for the month of June was driven by Brisbane, Perth and Adelaide. These are relatively affordable markets, although Brisbane has admittedly become less so in the past few years. But what that suggests is that in a high interest rate environment especially, where borrowing capacity is limited, people who want to buy property are being skewed to the more affordable markets. At least in the past 10 years, this is the highest level of diversity that we've seen in the annual capital growth trend, which ranges from a 23.6% increase across Perth in the financial year, all the way down to a fall of 0.1% across Hobart.
One of the other things we were talking about 12 months ago that hasn't changed, Home buyers again on alert after recent scams robbed a man of $153,000 during a property settlement. And if you're at the moment looking at settling, this story is just typical. Many of these stories are out there. What happened was criminals intercepted emails between the buyer and the lender's settlement agent, sending a fraudulent email with slightly altered addresses that went unnoticed. That's where they win if you're not checking the email address. So the fake email provided new bank details for the settlement funds, resulting in the theft. Now, these scams often involve hacking email accounts and manipulating high-value financial transactions. So that was something we were talking about 12 months ago, as I mentioned. It hasn't changed. Another talking point from last year were the ever-increasing rents.
Across the board, we are seeing rental prices being hiked up anywhere between 10% to 20%, which is something that renters have had to cop for quite a while now. And in terms of inflation rate, so rents make up one of the goods in the inflation rate basket. So it contributes to inflation. And it's one that is really, really sticky. It hasn't moved at all. In fact, it's gotten a little bit more worse in the past 12 months. So at the moment, rents contribute about 7.4% towards inflation rate. And that is actually higher than housing prices. Housing prices contribute 5.2% towards inflation rate. This is data as of May 2024. If you compare it to others, like alcohol and tobacco contribute 6.7%, clothing and footwear contribute 2.8%, even health, 6.1%. And I know we're all grappling with electricity. Electricity contributes 6.5% towards inflation rate. And so the fact that rent is at 7.4% is actually quite high. It's higher than some of those things that I've just said. And it is a sticky one because it has stayed at more than 7% for the past 12, 18 months.
And we are looking back over our shoulder this morning 12 months ago and what we were talking about. More from the real estate time tunnel after this.
Obviously, the middle of winter, I think it's the lows 17 and the highs 25. So for those that are freezing their bums off down south and those that travel here, and this is a really peak time for us because so many people are travelling here to get out of there, the spillover effect of the ones that stay is great.
And I guess a lot of these cashed up buyers, particularly those that might be in their 50s, coming up to retirement age, they cash out, they've got a lot of money in the bank and they buy in Mackay. You've got those examples right there on your back doorstep.
Yeah, well, what we've got is we've got two parts of that. We've got an affordable, so if you think about someone who lives on the waterfront or very close to it, if you think about the Gold Coast, let alone what Sydney and Melbourne prices would be, but someone who's on the actual water down there now it's 20 million to 50 million, probably if they're going to cash out or sell their place. Up here, you can buy on the waterfront for somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5. So you're going to put a lot of money in your bank.
It's the Real Estate Podcast, talking properties from 6 a.m. every day from every corner of the Australian real estate market.
It's a Real Estate Thursday. The week is moving by. Hope your property month of July is heading in the right direction. We continue this morning to look back 12 months ago and some of the talking points we were talking about. That was pretty interesting. Just before the break, you were saying that you had somebody, she decided, I can't afford Sydney, I'm going to move to Bali. We did mention that a couple of weeks ago, that it's not one-offs where people have decided to go to cheaper countries to live.
Yeah, well, now that work can be remote and sometimes you can work from wherever you can, it's easier to just go and live overseas at this point, and it's cheaper. And if you're out of the rental market and you can't afford it, this is what's happening.
Yeah, and the Rent Theory, I guess you should tell us a little bit about your organisation and what it is that you do there.
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially, we assist with the whole process of securing rental properties Australia-wide. So includes searching and sourcing of rental properties, liaising with the agents, the application process, so putting it together and submitting, and then viewing inspection. So that comes in handy if you are moving into state. We can actually go and inspect the property prior to you putting an application in to make sure it is up to the highest standard.
Now, tell us a little bit about the investors, because this is interesting. A lot of investors are buying into Noosaville and they're then renting out the property. They're travelling off overseas, are they, for 12 months and then coming back?
Yeah, yep. So I've got a couple of landlords at the moment that they've sold their property, let's say within the Sunshine Coast region or any other area around Australia, and they've decided to travel for 12 months overseas or, around Australia, and then they're renting their properties out for that period with the option with a possible extension to tenants within the region.
Is that something that you've kind of noticed since post-COVID, where people are coming in, they're doing that and they're taking off overseas?
Most definitely, because there's so many people with their work options now that could do work from home and work remotely. So they're still working as such when they're traveling because everything's just on a computer or a laptop now.
I think what people are surprised with, by the sound of it, when they do come from Sydney, is just the amount of property that they are getting with the ability to spend more, but they are sort of settling, many of them, in that $700,000 to $800,000 mark. Is that a fair comment?
Absolutely. And I think our Sydney buyers also come with a little bit more gusto when it comes to competitive bidding and also negotiation, because as much as our Melbourne buyers may not want to pay the extra, the Sydney people see it as fantastic value when they compare to back home. We're really closing those deals in spades with the Sydney people coming across to Melbourne to relocate.
I guess that you're seeing it from the locals on the ground, because the locals probably don't have as much enthusiasm and gas in the tank as much as the Sydney ones, just coming back to that point where they see the value and they're probably quite aggressive and they knock out a lot of these local buyers as a result.
That's exactly right. We're finding that dealing with the Sydney buyers, the negotiation process is a lot better because they are seeing the value. Where you compare with your Melbourne buyers, they're getting knocked out by these Sydney investors. Again, when they compare back home, it's just fantastic value. I mean, we're 35 minutes out of the city, 35 minutes down to Geelong and the Surf Coast, and you're buying a 4-bedroom family home for a median sale price of $700,000.
Now, Reece, I just wanted to talk to you about the property tax. Now, what's been happening over the last couple of months with Victoria's new land tax? They say it could drive landlords out of the state, some commentators are saying. So what are you sort of seeing on the ground?
Look, we are seeing some of our landlords, partly due to the land tax and also due to just general, I suppose, living expenses, potentially look to pull out of the market. But at the same token, we're also seeing those interstate investors. So it's not just Sydney-siders coming in to relocate. They're also looking at our real estate for an investment to become a landlord. And that's got to do a huge amount with our affordability. So when you weigh up the affordability to enter the market versus what they're seeing in Sydney, obviously we are still getting great demand through our investor marketplace.
And that is our look back 12 months ago and just some of the things that we were talking about. Have yourself a great Thursday out there in real estate land right across Australia. Look forward to more real estate property news and trends tomorrow morning. Have yourself a great day.
If you're a new listener, welcome. We talk to the most knowledgeable real estate experts across Australia every day from 6 a.m. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.